Spaghetti.
S-D-P. The Steve Dangle Podcast. With your hosts, Steve Dangle, Adam Wilde, and Jesse Blake.
And we're a foursome today. Mr. Harnarayan Singh from Hockey Night in Canada.
Woo! Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to this.
We're so pumped to have you, man. Thank you for making time. The new book is called One Game at a Time, My Journey from Small Town Alberta to Hockey's Biggest Stage. Harnarayan Singh, a guy that we've wanted to talk to forever. So glad that we got the chance to do this and to talk about this book, which has been out for, I believe, a month now.
Yeah, it was late September is when it came out. So at the beginning of the fall, it was supposed to be before the regular season began, but of course, the whole world turned upside down. So here we are in the off season in the fall.
How small town is small town? Because Canadians like to compete with each other, like to see who could come from the most obscure place. So what's the small town and how big is it?
Yeah, so at the time when I was growing up, it was 10,000 people. But when my parents came there in the 1960s and showed up in a town of just 3,000 wearing, turbans and visible minorities, people may not have even heard of a turban, let alone seeing one when my parents showed up in the 60s. And, we just went through, everyone kind of celebrated Halloween. And I remember my parents telling me their first experience with Halloween, and they were teachers at the high school and came home and they had heard that something was going to happen that night and they had to give something out. And, they're trying to figure out what they should make. My mom's in the kitchen and trying to figure out what she should make quickly to hand out to kids. And then, of course, as they were trying to figure that out, their house got egged. Oh. And so, it's just like, it's fascinating. There's a lot in the book in terms of my family's journey here and then how hockey kind of came together with it all. But as far as that small town of Brooks, Alberta, it was 3,000 initially, 10,000 people when I was growing up there. And we were the only practicing Sikh family. So we really stood out.
It's funny, Harnarayan, your story is, we hear so much, especially right now, about the American dream, right? Both candidates are out there. At the time of this recording, Biden's just won Wisconsin. We have no idea how this is going to end, but we hear a lot about the American dream and is that dead? And the Canadian dream is very much alive. And it seems like the Canadian dream is the one that your family has lived since the 1960s when they came here. And the fact that you're on Hockey Night in Canada on the biggest stage in the sport, I think is a testament to that. But, it's so great that you got to go back and tell the story. So can you start us from the beginning? The name of the town is what?
The name of the town is Brooks, and it's on the Trans-Canada Highway. Yeah, and it's when you go from Calgary and you're driving east towards Medicine Hat, and I'm sure some people have heard that because the Medicine Hat Tigers and Kelly Rudy used to play for there, and there's a lot of NHLers who played for that team. So it's in between Calgary and Medicine Hat. And yeah, just, it was in the 60s, it was there was a demand for teachers in Alberta. And my parents from India were, they were teachers there and they came here for an opportunity to change their family's life. And, it's humble beginnings. My dad was the first person in his small village in India to get a post-secondary degree. And so he really valued education. And my mom had to go on a hunger strike with her to convince her family to let her even get an education because it wasn't common for, my parents are a little older. They were born in the 1930s. And in those days in India, it wasn't really common for women and girls to get, a higher level education. So she had to convince her parents and grandparents to do that. So they really valued progressing themselves educationally. And so they came out here and lo and behold, my sisters were born, and then I come along in the 80s when the Gretzky years and the Oilers and the Flames both had some fantastic teams. And it was everywhere. The obsession with hockey, I was surrounded by it just because of the Gretzky years and the dynasty, but I would say I took it to a whole new level. Just in terms of, my hockey card collection or acting out, broadcasting elements as my toy microphone. Actually, I have it right over there. My sister kept that toy microphone that I would use to emulate Ron MacLean and call hockey games and things like that. And you got the Pro Stars Gretzky cereals there. So we were just through and throughout obsessed with hockey, and it really helped me in my childhood. Like my classmates, they knew I was different. I was getting questions every single day of my elementary school years. How long is your hair? How long is your turban? Why do you wear it? All sorts of differences. We're vegetarian. I wear a steel bracelet to remember the creator at all times. There's all these things but I had to figure out how to be comfortable in my own skin. And it was hockey that helped me.
Go ahead, Steve.
It's always a difficult question because it's forever ago. And I always tell people, I've liked hockey since before I can remember, because I don't remember my first hockey memory. Do you remember yours?
I do, because of family, and I do because it was a gift that I used for so many years. So my very first gift was a mini hockey stick, and it said Northlands Coliseum. And I kept it for years and years. And that's where the Oilers, the building that they played in for so many years when they won the Cups, it was originally called Northlands Coliseum before it became Skyreach Center, Rexall Place, and then Rogers. And so, that was kind of a symbol for everything that came after that in terms of the obsession with hockey. And I would say that so many of my early memories, so many of my friendships, so much of the rapport with my teachers was because of hockey. And I'm scared to think about how it would have been without that, because of the fact that I also, and I get into it in the book, I experienced some bullying. I experienced racism. And so when I think about it and reflect back on it, all these positive memories that have to do with hockey, had it not been for that, I probably would have experienced so much more bullying and so much more racism, just because in the eyes of the cool guys who were playing hockey, and my family we weren't skaters. My parents had me in all sorts of like musical instruments and all these other extracurricular activities. I just knew I didn't have the physical stature to be an ice hockey player. I loved ball hockey and playing road hockey because it was easy for me to pick that up. But I knew I wasn't going to be a hockey player. And when other boys in my class who were bigger and stronger, and they were ice hockey players, but they thought it was cool that I knew so much about hockey, and I was always talking about it and wearing hockey sweaters to school, making all my assignments about hockey. I may have had a very different experience with that type of a classmate, but those guys actually came to my defense when I needed help. And so it was, it really, really helped me create a rapport with my classmates.
Ryan, the last thing that any kid wants to do when they're 10, 11, 12 is stand out, right? You don't want to stand out. You don't want to be different. And you don't want to be quote unquote weird. And it's funny because I don't think you had a choice in that matter. I think given where you were in the world and the amount of people there and frankly, attitudes at the time, you had no choice to be that, and you've made a career out of standing out. What do you think you picked up from that era of your life that you carry with you today that makes you unique as a broadcaster and as a person?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest with you, Adam, I think to answer that, I'll also explain this, that, when you're a kid and you're growing up at that age, a lot of adults in your life are asking you this question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was, my consistent answer was, I want to be a hockey commentator. Like, I want to be on Hockey Night in Canada. And it was met with sarcasm. It was met with laughter. Oh, okay, that's great. What do you really want to do? and I kind of had to figure it out as I grew up, that, okay, why are people reacting that way? And sometimes I would get a blunt response, and the response was, and I learned this fairly early on, that, hey, Harnarayan, not very many people look like you on TV, especially sports television. There's, this is just a dream. Like, you got to be realistic. You should think about doctor, engineer, lawyer, other things. You're smart enough, you're good enough grades. You should think about other things like that. And so I think what happened as well is that I was constantly having to educate others around me about who I was. And my parents, being teachers, they told me not to make it confrontational. They said, this is an opportunity for you to teach others about who we are. And, they were very open-minded in the sense that, yeah, of course, participate in Canadian culture and all that, but this is what your faith teaches you. And it really has made me into the person I am today. I'll give you an example. One of the reasons why I really latched on to Wayne Gretzky and became obsessed with him is my parents are teaching me about the Sikh faith, and in it, the scriptures are saying, abandon your ego, be a humble person, be respectful to others. And I'm watching Wayne Gretzky break all these records, Gordie Howe's records. He's always given Gordie Howe so much respect. He's given his dad credit. He's giving his teammates credit. I loved how humble he was when he was, at the top of his game. And so I really tried to, without thinking about it at the time, I was trying to marry all of these different facets of my life together. And I think it's still what I've tried to do now in terms of, you even look at the very back of the book. I play East Indian or Sikh musical instruments. And I really wanted this to be a part of the book that there I am playing the tabla, East Indian percussion instrument. And I'm sitting on the ice at the Saddle Dome in front of an NHL hockey net. And it's always been trying to put them two together. And now it's like an example to other kids who are visible minorities, other kids of different cultures and faiths that, it really can work. You can be a proud Canadian, you can participate in sports and have fun, but you can also be proud of your heritage, your faith, your culture. And I think going through all of that in that small town of Brooks, of having to try to marry everything together, find that balance, that's made me who I am today. And that's what I like to talk about to other kids out there and other people, is that, if it can work for me, and if I'm able to have this dream come to fruition, then of course, whatever your dreams and goals are, we're so lucky to be here. And you talked about the Canadian dream. This is the country where it's possible, not anywhere else. We see what's going on everywhere else. There's so much hatred, so much divisiveness, but we're very lucky to be here. We still have a long ways to go. I mean, I get it. This is such a long-winded answer. You probably hate me right now.
No, it's a podcast. Please keep going.
I get it. So I get it when, I'm walking in the parking lot of a mall, or I get it on social media. I still have incidents of, ignorance and racism that I think we have a long ways to go, but I'm still so proud of Canada and who we are and what we represent. But I do worry about the future too, because I hope we can maintain this level of acceptance and tolerance that we have. And sports is a great way to do it. Hockey is a great way to do it.
What role did Ron MacLean play in your life and career? Because you grew up watching him, and then you end up on the same platform as him, and then he writes the foreword to your book about your life. So can you talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, Ron MacLean has just, I can't say enough good things about that individual. He is just so genuine in terms of how much time and respect he gives to anyone and everyone. And you see it when he's going around to the hometown hockey and the way he interacts with so many people, how busy he keeps his schedule, but he's still so personable. I think he's the perfect Canadian. For me personally, when Hockey Night Punjabi first started, he was right away a champion of the show. He was so supportive. And I remember those early conversations with him. And then we became closer in the sense that he's from Red Deer, Alberta. We have that connection. He started his broadcast career in Alberta as well. And, I started leaning on him for some guidance and advice, especially in the more recent years too. And I mean, he's just been so incredible, so supportive. And for a guy who's as busy as he is, he still takes out time for advice and just to talk. And everything that went on, even with Don Cherry and things too, it's a difficult situation. Obviously Ron was very much impacted, but so were guys like myself and my colleagues on Hockey Night Punjabi too, because, our community was singled out. We were all of a sudden under attack about poppies, even though we were wearing them too. And so, there's been so many different things that over the years that have just drawn me closer to Ron. And I'm so very fortunate to have him so readily agree to write the foreword. And, he talked about my family and us having him over and everything. It's just, he's an incredible individual. And I'm indebted to people like that who've helped me along the way.
I need to know, like, when you first met Ron and you're like, oh yeah, I'm from Brooks. He seems like he could do half an hour of television on any town in the country with 500 or more people. Did he already know about Brooks?
Oh, of course, because and that's an easy one for him because he's from Alberta. But I'll tell you one really quick story. So this would have been 2008, 2009. Hockey Night Punjabi first begins, and I run into him, or I see him at the studio in Toronto, and I tell him the story about Gretzky, and I said, on Gretzky's birthday on January 26th in Brooks, Alberta. The way my parents used to celebrate my siblings and I birthday, we used to do a special prayer ceremony. They would make this special food, this exact same thing on our birthdays, and do the prayer. And I remember in Brooks at our house in the kitchen, it's January 26th. Of course, I know Gretzky's birthday from all the hockey cards I have of his, and I've memorized all that info. And I say to my mom, hey, it's called Prashad. And I said, can we make Prashad because Gretzky's birthday and you make it for our birthdays, can we make it for him too? And my mom, of course, being a teacher, understanding kids and being supportive, she's like, of course we can. And so for several years in Brooks, Alberta, little did Wayne Gretzky know, but there we were doing a little prayer ceremony for him too. And I told Ron MacLean that story in 2008. Fast forward how many years later, I've never mentioned that to him again. Hometown hockey begins, and somewhere or another, somehow I came up and Brooks came up, probably because of either Curtis Glencross or Cale Makar or something, because they played in Brooks. And he goes, oh, speaking of Brooks, and he talks about my parents, names them by name, and tells that story. And this is 6, 7, 8 years later, maybe even 10. And I'm at home, we're watching as a family, and my jaw completely dropped. I'm like, how can he have remembered that? And I told him that just in passing so long ago. So it's just a tangible proof that I think he's a genius.
Yeah. And a national treasure for sure. Yeah. There's no question about that. I mean, one of our favorite episodes, we had him on, and what did we talk to him for 2 hours, guys?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
He just came in and sat and talked to us. And I mean, there was a lot going on at that point. I remember he had some interesting thoughts on, whether the Penguins should go to the White House and take a picture with Donald Trump. And, there was a lot going on at that moment in time in hockey, as there has been, for the last 4 years. It's been socially, it's been a time of upheaval for this sport that has been so conservative and so much its own thing and its own way for such a long time. There is massive changes happening, as we've seen. I ask you, are you encouraged by what you've seen in the last year within the game, or are you still obviously there's work to do, but would you say you're more encouraged now than you would be in 2018? Or has it illuminated some things that maybe even you didn't think existed, and maybe we're further back in your mind than when we thought, when it comes to diversity and welcoming new communities? And I mean, there's an economic barrier to getting into hockey as well. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that, prior to the 4-year era we're talking about, I thought we as society had made quite a bit of progress. I felt like I was experiencing less moments of racism, and I thought things were, moving in the right direction. And then you have the election of Donald Trump, and just the rhetoric that's being used, and that has been used, and the spewing vitriol of the hatred and just the divisiveness. It's had an impact. And then we had the Don Cherry incident when he was let go, and I'm not singling out Don Cherry as a person. I want to talk about what happened after that, and that scared me as a Canadian, because of the reaction from some people on social media and just in general, that I saw a dark side of Canada that I either had just completely ignored, or I didn't want to even believe that it existed. But some of my colleagues, some of the people who are diverse journalists and reporters in Canada with CBC and newspapers in this country, some of the hate mail and some of the messages they received, social media, it was shocking. It was so shocking to see that fellow Canadians would say these types of things and to say, all you brown and black people should just go the hell back where you came from, and all this kind, just such hatred, such vicious wording, and that really was an eye opener for me, and I realized, okay, I've got to speak out. I've got to talk about why we feel offended. We have to have this conversation. Look at the four of us even here. Who out of us can we say is more Canadian than the other? And that's the beauty of it. We can't, because we're all Canadian, right? So we had, it sparked this huge national conversation. And then you have what happened with George Floyd, and then consequentially how it impacted the world of sports with the NBA, and then eventually the NHL postponing games. And so I'm going from, I'm quite worried about where things are going, but then there's this glimmer of hope. The glimmer of hope that happened is what we started seeing is finally the NHL teams and the players, they started taking a stand together. In that moment in Hub City, Edmonton, when the entire Western Conference players that were left, it wasn't just the diverse players who stood up at that press conference. They were all standing there together with Ryan Reeves, Nazem Kadri, and that was a big moment for me, because it showed that, okay, other players of the majority are realizing that this isn't just a fight that diverse players need to stand up for. This is something everybody needs to stand up for. That gave me some hope. The other thing that gave me hope is when we started seeing news reports of teams like the Dallas Stars saying they were losing season ticket holders because of Tyler Seguin attending a protest and because of the team's stance, but they were still willing to take that stand and make that statement. That also gave me hope. And, I've had the opportunity now to work on, Gary Bettman created this, and Kim Davis created these committees, and I'm on the fan inclusion committee, and there's representatives from all sorts of different teams, and hearing that people in the hockey community at the levels of decision maker levels, they're realizing that, okay, we might be alienating, we are alienating a certain group of our fan base, but we don't care anymore. And that's what gives me a little bit of hope, is that, for the longest time, because hockey has been conservative, a white sport, maybe there was this fear of losing a part of that fan base, because if we talk about these issues, I get this complaint all the time that don't marry politics with hockey. I don't want to be hearing about this, but this isn't politics. This is just basic human rights of humanity. It's respect for one another, right? And so I finally see a glimmer of hope that we're doing this for the right reasons, and we're not going to care about losing those fans. I even think that the fans who are complaining about it, they're still going to watch. I mean, if you've been watching hockey your whole life and you're a racist or you're ignorant, even if we're having this conversation, you're probably still going to watch, despite maybe you hate me, maybe you hate Ron, maybe you hate some other people on TV who are talking about it, but you're probably still going to watch. And I'm glad we're not worried about those. Those fans don't make an NHL arena welcoming. I've been, as a fan, bought my own ticket, sitting with friends, other people of color, diversity, and we've had beer thrown at us. We've had all sorts of things. I've been called Taliban. I've been called Al Qaeda. All these things that have nothing to do with walking to an arena, walking back to my car, inside an arena. Those types of people, they don't even make the experience welcoming anyways. So if you're asking me, I'd rather not even have them at a hockey arena or as a fan. And finally, I think the sport is realizing that. So that's what gives me some glimmer of hope.
Did you deal with Don Cherry much? Did you know him?
I did. I met him a number of times just when the show was Hockey Night Punjabi was first based in Toronto. I didn't have any negative experience with him. I mean, he commanded a lot of respect. Everybody gave him that respect. He was an iconic figure. We kind of, in our culture, we have people called as Babaji, and it's like you bow down and respect them. He was an older, elderly gentleman who, when he would walk into a room, he had that presence where everybody would kind of give him that respect and things. And I remember one offhand comment. For a couple of years, we did some Toronto Raptors when things were CBC based. We did Toronto Raptors games in Punjabi, a few of them. And back then the Raptors weren't that good. And he made an offhand remark to me while he was getting makeup done that he's like, who's going to watch the Raptors games in Punjabi when no one's watching them in English? And I that was just a funny comment that he made that I remember. And obviously things have changed now with the Raptors being the championship team that they are a year ago. I didn't have any personally, negative experience. I will say this, though, I talk about it in the book. There's a chapter called Poppies. People would always ask me that question that, hey, did you ever meet Don Cherry? How was he with you? And then when I started to analyze and reflect on it, I was like, maybe the community already had this perception that he might not be as welcoming to them. Why I realized after reflecting on it, like, why were people my whole career so far? Why have they been so curious with how he was with me personally? So there's just been that underlying tone the whole time. This wasn't the first time he said something controversial. So many young people, when they put out the loops of stuff he said and put it all together from years and years ago, there was outrage just because of that too, because they were like, how could he have gotten away with saying so much stuff? You look at women in sports and then saying that, when he was saying they shouldn't be allowed to cover hockey and
be in the dressing room
and all that stuff, right? I have women colleagues who are of a different generation who weren't around when he said those things, and we've had conversations where they were like, I cannot believe he got away with saying that, and there weren't any repercussions. We're in a different time now, and you got to change with the times.
I do want to ask, because as Steve mentioned, it's sitting over your left shoulder. The call that really, I know that you are huge within the Punjabi community, but this puts you on the worldwide hockey stage, the Bonino call. You got to run us through what you can even remember about that moment, because I realize when you're calling games, you probably, there's a lot of stuff that just kind of goes in and out. You don't remember. What do you remember leading up to that? Do you remember the goal? Do you remember saying Bonino? Do you remember anything afterwards?
So I get into it very detailed in the book.
Okay, so we won't ruin it.
There's actually several Bonino calls. I'll give you a little bit of so the first one that ever happened was a mistake in my notes, and I'll give this away, where for left wing, center, and right wing, I accidentally wrote Bonino's name down for all three positions. And that is the mistake that became the blessing in disguise. So that was in my head, and the adrenaline's pumping, and he scored some big goals on this HBK line for the Penguins with Carl Hagelin and Phil Kessel. They were basically the engine that drove the team in those playoffs. And so the adrenaline's pumping, and he scores the first one was against Washington, actually. And so that's what came out of and we have an enthusiastic style. I know for the Leafs fans watching this, I'm sure some of you have heard the Mitch Marner. I like when he scores a game-winning goal or an overtime winner and that type of thing. We like to have quite a bit of fun with it. And it's enthusiastic to say the least. And so when Bonino scored that goal, what was in my mind was Bonino, but it was, it came out times 10 or 11. And initially we Pittsburgh Penguins fans in the area of Pennsylvania, we got a lot of love from them. And little did we know, though, they were demanding, they were like, we want another Bonino call. And then, we reached the Stanley Cup final. It's game one, and it was just served on a platter. There was such a demand for it, and it's 2.5 minutes to go. I remember the goal. He's standing just right in front of the net, and he just gets it. He just shovels it. And there you go against the Sharks, and it was just there. And then my voice even cracked while people love that for some reason. It's embarrassing for me, but people have mentioned that to me so much. And then, of course, after that, they win the Stanley Cup. The team invites us to the parade, and then everything that happened from there, with meeting Lemieux and talking, surprising the team in the dressing room. There's so much. That's such a fun memory in our career-wise. I consider Nick Bonino a good friend now, and he's such a great guy. And there's some really cool moments mentioned in the book about that whole thing, about how we were rock stars in Pittsburgh for a couple of years there.
It was a fascinating social media moment for me personally, because I was at that game. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to, watch the broadcast because I was there.
Yeah.
And I noticed, as we're walking sort of around the courtyard, people are, they're starting to, check this out, and they're showing everyone. And sure enough, I saw it within a few minutes. You were an instant sensation with everyone in Pittsburgh. It was fascinating to watch.
Yeah, we had a cult following there. People were telling me that you have no idea how big this is in Pittsburgh. And when we got to Pittsburgh, even on the flight to Pittsburgh, people are taking pictures and tweeting it out. And it was just, It was crazy. People were stopping cars along the streets when they saw us walking to jump out and get pictures with us. It was, Bonino, Nick himself was saying that so many, obviously his teammates were into it big time, but he said for, years after that, opposing players on the ice were always saying it to him. He had so many people who had it as their ringtone, and it was just, him and I'll have this special bond for the rest of our careers, and even for the show, for Hockey Night Punjabi, my colleagues and I, that, as you mentioned in your question first, it was revolutionary for our show, for ourselves personally, career-wise, to be able to put ourselves on the map. So it was just, like I say, a mistake that was a blessing in disguise.
You guys have done some, I don't know if it's funny or interesting, translations to hockey terms. Like you have a different term for penalty box or when there's a bad period. Can you explain some of those?
Yeah, and one of the cool things in the book is I put a bit of a glossary in there as a guide to watching Hockey Night Punjabi. And the penalty box one is kind of my favorite in the sense that it adds some dramatic flair and it adds the spice. You've probably had some Punjabi East Indian food and it's always got the nice spicy flavor to it. So penalty box, we say Saja da Dabba, which means back in English as box of punishment, right? So it's everything's kind of a much more fun way of doing things. Like if a team has a bad period, the amount of chai we drink in our culture is just, I've got it here. I can't even do one of these interviews without it. So if a team has a bad period, it's like, team nu to cha chahiye. It's like, so during the intermission, they need to go get some chai, a cup of chai, man. They need to figure it out so that they're better. Like that was a horrible period, right? So there's so many kind of those terms that we've created that are hybrids, or then you have fun with it. And we really sports it's for entertainment. You guys know this in terms of how much fun you guys have. But that should be at the forefront too. Like it should be business when it's, a serious part of the game, or it's, a certain point in the playoffs. But for the most part, you want to make sure you're having fun and that the audience is having fun. And that's really what our show has been about.
I wish that kind of energy was on the English broadcast. I'll be honest, on any network at any time. I love the energy that you guys have, and I think it's missing, frankly, from a lot of the broadcasts that are happening. I think hockey's a little too slow on the broadcast end, and I've been on the record of that, and I know that can land me some hot water with our colleagues.
Adam works for Bell.
Oh no!
I'll say it about TSN. I'll say it about Sportsnet. I think that they fire it up. Somebody get them some chai. So yeah. I hope that you, and I don't know if this is a consideration for you, because I realize that you have a unique set of skills, being able to speak English and Sikh. But it would be really nice if you could do some English broadcasts too, a little more often, and call those games.
That's my goal. I would love to do that. I think even when I was a kid, my dream to do this was to do it in English. And I'm very grateful that Hockey Night Punjabi came to fruition. That's how I got my foot in the door. Had it not been for that, I probably, wouldn't be here and sitting in front of you guys, and wouldn't have a book and everything that I've experienced. So it's also that show has done so much for growing the game. Unifying Canadians. There's such a Saturday night tradition in South Asian families for 3 generations to sit together and watch it. And people are putting their kids into hockey because of that show. So there is a need now for that show. And, we completed our 13th season, and it's almost been like, it was like my first baby, you know what I mean? Like I'm very lucky to have been a part of it since day one and watch it grow to what it's become today. But I will say that, the end goal for myself and for some of my colleagues as well is to get on that mainstream English side. I think we have a lot to contribute. But I also think that going back to the other topics we were talking about, I think it would help break down more barriers. Someone who maybe hasn't met someone who looks like me who's watching on TV, and they might, listen to me and be like, hey, he's got a Canadian accent, eh? Right? So if I'm able to just, normalize diversity on TV by just being a part of an English hockey broadcast, then why not? We need to be doing that. I also want to be able to help open the door for future generations, so that when I was being told when I was a kid that there wouldn't be a place for someone like me, I want to be able to break that door open and show people that it doesn't matter who you are, how you look, there is a place for you, and so that's important to me as well. But also at the end of the day, it's the love of the game. I mean, I love hockey. I love Canada. I'm so passionate about the sport, and it boils over. Like, I become giddy when I'm talking about hockey. And so I would just love to be able to be a part of the mainstream hockey world and do play-by-play in English. And hopefully that day will come sooner than later.
Well, I have to tell you, this has been one of the most fun interviews we've had.
Thank you. I appreciate
illuminating
that.
And awesome. I can't wait to fully read the book. And again, if you would like to read it, Harnarayan, I'm going to let you introduce it this time. Your book is?
Yeah, it's one game at a time. My journey from small town Alberta to hockey's biggest stage. All that Pittsburgh Bonino stuff. My family, how Hockey Night Punjabi started. A lot of Gretzky stuff. Hey, my wedding was in a hockey arena. A life-size Stanley Cup cake was our wedding cake.
Oh
Kelly
Rudy
did the ceremonial face-off. Body checked me out of the way so my wife could win. There's a lot of fun stuff in there, and I'm really thankful. It's a national bestseller now, and I think it's exactly what the world needs right now: a positive story of diversity through the lens of a Canadian hockey broadcaster. So I had a lot of fun being on with you guys too. Hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
Well, I hope so. Just for fun. You don't have to be promoting a book. And if I can share one quick story, I grew up with a young man who I've recently reconnected with. His name's Jatin. Jatin Bhandari.
Nice.
His family is Hindu. And on Saturday nights when I would go to his house and hang out with his cat, Peter, and his dad would always have Hockey Night in Canada on. Ramesh, who unfortunately no longer with us. And they were first generation Canadians. And it's funny that was my first experience with multiculturalism with the sport and bringing people into the culture. It was Ramesh that watched Hockey Night in Canada to learn English.
Wow.
And that was I thought that was very, very cool at the time. And I know Jatin had one of those, there was no difference in terms of talent level with him or me. He could have ended up in broadcasting as well. Very funny, very polite, and very affable guy. One of those guys that can charm anybody in any room. And I think seeing more people like yourself on television, by which he could have modeled himself, maybe he would have gone that route as well. So what you're doing is amazing. Please keep it up. We hope we get your energy on the English broadcast. Not that we want to take away from the Sikh broadcast, but Harnarayan Singh, thank you so much for your time today.
That means a lot. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. All the best.
Well, I don't know about you, but that was one of the most fun interviews we've ever done. I really enjoyed that.
I can't wait to listen back.
Yeah.
We just gushed for 5 minutes. Like, thank you so much. Thank you. My face hurts. Adam.
What?
Oh man, the Leafs could use some chai.
Man, the broadcast needs a little chai. I'm saying I know that makes it unpopular, but man, let's pick it up. Let's get some energy going.
But I was trying to hold it together, and then I looked at Jesse's face.
I'm not gonna not laugh at that. It was a great line.
and you got the Dr. Seuss mug. Oh my god!
One fish, two fish.
Love it.
Red fish,
chai
blue
tea,
fish.
by the way, amazing.
The best.
Don't drink it. Chai tea.
Supposedly, and I didn't know this. I was an ignorant person about this until a couple of weeks ago.
That's not surprising.
Chai tea just means tea. So it's like you're saying TT.
What?
Oh, because chai means tea?
It's just chai.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah.
It's just chai.
Well, and that's where the British tea obsession comes from is India, right? So that's where they
tell me, Adam.
Well, that's where, I mean.
History corner.
There's the ugly colonialism side of it, but yes, that's where the tea obsession comes from is And the Americans used to be obsessed with tea, but they switched to coffee during the American Revolution when it started. When they threw all the tea in the harbor, they didn't want to buy tea from England that would go to England from India, be processed in England, and then shipped to the United States. They said, no, screw that. We're going with coffee, which is why you have a North American coffee obsession.
All right. So, Adam's History Corner, Boston Tea Harbor. Go.
Tea Party. Okay. Well, okay. All right. There's lots of great angles on the American Revolution. First off, it never happens and it never succeeds without the French. It's just a bunch of rowdy, drunken cowboys and criminals like John Hancock. And by the way, John Hancock is like the Han Solo of the American Revolution. The guy,
I don't know what that means.
Han Solo, he's a smuggler. He was a smuggler. That's what John Hancock was. And he's got his name on the Declaration of Independence.
He's a criminal.
By the way, if you look on it, it's the biggest name because he was a really big personality. And there's like a flourish. And that's why they say, give me your John Hancock on signatures, because it's such a big signature compared to everybody else's. Now, I'm not trying to besmirch these people. They were very smart people. They did a lot of amazing things.
They're crooks, though.
But John Hancock for sure was trying to sneak things in. Americans don't like to pay taxes. Maybe you've heard. They've never liked to pay taxes. So what happened was you had the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, whatever you want to call it. The British wrestle Canada and a bunch of other territories from the French. They sell some of it back in the treaty, but essentially they own that whole eastern North American coast from Nova Scotia all the way down to just above Florida, which doesn't become part of it until America takes over and then there's a Spanish purchase, whatever. Long story short, this is going to be a massive move for England. However, because of something called mercantilism, which is everything has to go trade-wise through the home mother country, it allowed the English to set prices and taxes that the American merchants didn't like. They wanted to deal directly with the French, the Spanish, and the Dutch in the East Indies, in the West Indies, not the East Indies, and ship directly to them, trade directly with them. But if you wanted to trade for something like tobacco or cotton or some of those things that were only available in certain parts of the world, or sugarcane, you had to ship it to England, and then England would ship it over to the Indies. And the reason for that is England wanted to make sure that it pulled its tax out to pay for its country, and obviously the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, whatever you'd like to call it. So what happens is they institute a tea tax, and the whole argument is we have no representation in English Parliament as Americans or as North Americans. We have nobody here representing our rights in Parliament. How can you tax us without representing us? You have what you call a representative government. How can you tax us? And so, when you read the American Revolution from not the American perspective, as much as they make a solid point about taxation without representation, there's a lot of shenaniganery going on as well. And what it came down to was a moment of opportunity where Americans realized that they were more powerful than they thought they were, more powerful than anybody could have thought they were. And the long story short with the American Revolution and what kicks off with the Tea Party and so many other things is that it became economically disastrous for England to continue the war because France is in it, and France finds the war also economically disastrous, and we'll get to that in a second. It becomes such a boat anchor around the British economy that they go, you know what? Why don't we just let them have it, and then we can trade with them again? So they did. They let them have it.
What year is this?
What's that?
1984.
1775 to 1781. And and that's when Yorktown surrendered. It was General Cornwallis who was surrounded there. He had tried to start a Southern campaign. Now, if you read the book on mosquitoes that I told you to read, you'll know that his army suffered tremendously from things like malaria and yellow fever, which were, things like, just terrible, terrible scourges on armies at the time. Had that not existed, they probably don't win the American Revolution. The Americans, it remains an English colony. Now, what happens with the French afterwards, and I think I've mentioned this before, is they spent so much money funding the American Revolution. And then the Americans come back and say, well, no, we're an independent country. And France is like, well, no, but we were going we were going to trade exclusively, right? And the Americans are like, no, why would we give you exclusive trade rights? We're a country now. Thanks for your help. We owe you some money, but we're a country now. And what happens is the French economic system, which is old and terrible and tired and already on its last legs, falls apart under Louis XVI because of the debt incurred during the American Revolution. It leads to the French Revolution. The Americans try to pull out of their debt owed to the French because they say, well, we didn't. So when the revolutionary government takes over, the first of like 5 or 6, the Americans go, well, we signed it with the king. We didn't sign it with your government. So we don't really owe you. And so there was a lot of that. So there's lots of that going on. Oh, yeah.
Adam Wild. Because
anyway, so there's lots and lots of stuff about the American Revolution, world politics wise, that's really interesting. Like Spain was involved in the American Revolution as well. People don't know that. But Spain was not directly allied to the United States. Spain was at war with England. They were allied with France, but they refused to recognize the United States because they didn't want their colonies in Mexico going, hey, we'd like independence too. So they recognized France's role. They recognized that they were in war with England, but they did not recognize the United States, even though they were fighting on the same side.
This is the gap between Adam and I. Adam's explaining these things, and I'm like, that's Hamilton, yep. And then he keeps going, and I'm like, that's Les Miserables. Yep, that's okay. I'm following. I'm good.
Yeah.
And then, holy cow.
The American, no, I think it's just a lot of useless knowledge, but American Revolution is fascinating, not just from the American perspective. If you read the British perspective on the American Revolution, it leads to what they call the Second Empire. It reinvigorates England to try to have as much influence in the world as possible because of the influence they've lost by losing the American colonies. So then they go and they put all of their influence into Africa and India and Burma and places like what was Burma, and they become a worldwide power and that sort of thing. But it's the first empire is the British with America, and then the Second Empire. And there's actually architecture named after the Second Empire. It's called Second Empire architecture. There's those big Victorian houses with the big steeples and stuff. That's considered Second Empire because they were in the second phase of their empire. So weird, useless knowledge. There you have it. Yeah, they actually teach classes on this stuff, man. It's crazy.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah. What, at our school?
Not in our school. No, if you went to architecture school, you'd know about Second Empire architecture. It's one of the most famous types of architecture out there. Victorian architecture is subdivided into certain pieces, and Second Empire is one of them.
So it's not all just Victorian. You can
no, because the Victorian era was 60 something years long.
Right.
So then you've got Tudor revival, and you've got Edwardian and Georgian and like all the ones that came afterwards. And then of course when World War I hits, everything kind of stops. And then it gets very practical, and then you get Art Deco, and you start to get into the modern era. So it's a pretty fascinating topic. The American Revolution is something that I highly suggest you look at from not the American perspective, because the American perspective is important and interesting, but that's all we get. I think you should look at it from the French perspective and the Spanish perspective and the British perspective, because it speaks to the world and what the world is going through. And there are suspiciously few books written on those topics, which is such a shame. Like the world is dying for a big book on Britain losing the American Revolution and what that meant. Mm-hmm. And letters at the time and what newspaper clippings would have done. Like, I'm surprised there isn't more. But it exists really only in historical, like academic circles, which is a shame, because I think it's important for Americans to know where they stood at the time. They were a completely different country. Right.
You don't get that third person perspective on just wars and the losers in certain conflicts when you're growing up in school and learning history.
You don't.
Like, there's no kind of, okay, let's take a step back from everything and look at where these things happened in the placement of the entire world and how other countries felt. You kind of just get the in the eye of the hurricane perspective of these winners and losers in history.
I think you got to understand the other side as much as you can. And obviously we get a lot of stuff like Nazi Germany stuff, but we never get Kaiser Wilhelm Germany stuff in World War I. You never hear about why Franz Joseph, the leader of Austria-Hungary, wanted them to go to war so badly. There are books about it, And I think I mentioned one about the three emperors, the last three kings or something. Here's a book. If you're actually interested in this stuff, I can pull it up because I read it in September, thanks to our buddy Kevin Harris in Nashville, Tennessee, who took us to the Predators game. Love Kev. Let me pull it up here. It's called George, Nicholas, and Wilhelm, the Three Royal Cousins and the Road to World War I, which I think is an interesting one. And the other one I think that you would really find interesting is not a book at all. It's a free podcast. If you're on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, Dan Carlin is doing a 3-part. Well, it's going to be a 4th part here probably in a year because he takes forever to put them out. But there are 3 parts right now on Japan and what led to Japan's war in World War II. And, people forget that Japan was a British, United States, Canadian ally in World War I. People forget that. They fought against Germany. They fought against, and actually Italy was too. They fought against so many of these things. What led them to switch sides? What, led to, their culture and the government that they had and how the military basically ran roughshod over everybody. And then, gets into Hirohito and so many of the things that are these fascinating, crazy historical characters that you hear little bits about from our North American vantage point, but something that makes it's just such a fascinating thing. And Dan Carlin does such a great job. As you guys know, he's our favorite podcast in the world. Steve does a great impression of him.
I haven't listened to him in so long.
You got to hear this then. I mean, the 3rd part just came out in October. So I would suggest you check it out because it's really, really good.
I took a university course that was, I think it was like world history, 1900 and 1945. So imagine my surprise when first class, he's like, all right, so we're starting in, I think it was like 1840s Japan. And the whole class goes, what? And he's like, no. For the first 2 classes, you're going to have to stick with me because everything I'm going to tell you is useless without this information.
Yeah.
Oh. I was just like, he marked, it was tough because like in math, maybe you get part marks or in English, you get part marks. If there were 10 parts to an answer and you got the first 4 things right in chronological order, but the 5th one wrong, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 right, you got 4 because the whole house falls down the second you get one of the pieces right.
Yeah,
he was and I'm sitting there like, this is an elective? What did I do to myself? Yeah. I've never taken that many notes in my life. I got carpal tunnel.
I think I've said this on the show before, but I took a history elective in my 1 year of university, and I sat down for the first class, and the guy said, "You're going to spend between 10 and 15 hours a week at the library for this course each week." And I got out of that course and dropped it immediately.
And then you dropped school entirely.
And then I dropped school. I wasn't going to do that. Like, I just didn't have the drive to do that. I'm one of those people that if I want to do something, there's not going to be anything that stops me. But if I don't want to do it, I just won't. Like, I just can't force myself to do it. And I couldn't force myself with school anymore, even with a subject like history that I really love. Because so much of what history is not history itself or the stories. It's the annotations and the bibliography and the primary source documents and shit like that are very, very important. But I'm not interested in that. I don't want to be a historian. I'm interested in the stories from the guys that did all that kind of work and then relaying those if I can. That I'm a fan of history. I'm not a historian, right?
So Ryan Pollock didn't get any UFA years in his deal with the island.
Let's do that. Yo, can I ask you a question?
You just did.
The GM of the year this year. What did he win for?
This is the thing I keep saying with Lou Lamoriello, because everyone talks about him. Well, not everyone. There's 2 schools. He's either the best GM ever, or he's an idiot who wouldn't know how to unlock his own phone. And so many of his moves, if you look at them individually, are terrible, especially fiscally, like financially, in terms of the cap, in terms of you might lose one of your best defensemen in a couple of years. Like the Islanders haven't been through enough of that. Mm-hmm. In terms of all that, if you look at them individually, they're terrible. And there they are in the second round 2 years ago and in the third round this year. And we looked at their free agency a few years ago, and they signed this guy, and this guy to replace John Tavares. And we're like, they're going to finish last place. And what the hell?
Yeah.
They get Robin Lehner and they turn him into a Vezina candidate, which sounds like a ridiculous thing to say now because you're thinking of Robin Lehner over the past 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
He was the most ho-hum of the ho-hum. Thomas Greiss was coming off like the worst year of his career. I don't know. Lou Lamoriello is a fascinating case to me because I wouldn't have done at least 75% of the moves he's done since joining the Islanders. And who can argue they're a bad team?
You can't. They're not a bad team.
You can't.
Okay. So let's separate some things here. First off, if you think Lou Lamoriello is an idiot, I question your sanity. The man has won several Stanley Cups. I could say confidently that you could maybe make an argument that he's past his prime. And that's possible. It's going to happen to everyone. There's going to be a time where we all have to stop broadcasting because we're just not as good as we used to be, or it'll be time to retire and actually just go to, get on the golf course or do whatever. I don't golf, but you know what I mean? There's a time for everyone. Lou is 77, 78 years old. There are people that can make that argument, but Steve, the results don't show that. The results show that he's doing great. I'm reading about him a lot in Brian Burke's new book. I'm reading that right now. And it's a fascinating book about, to me, it speaks a lot to hockey management culture. And I'm really, really enjoying it. And he talks about Lou Lamoriello and the effect that Lou had on Brian's life. And I'm not going to get into it. Hopefully we can get Brian on the show to talk about it a little bit. We haven't organized that or anything, but we'd love to have him on. Lou Lamoriello, to me, has a makeup in his mind of what a team needs to look like, what a player at each position needs to be for a team to be successful. And, when you look at like the Leo Komarov contract, which is one that sticks out to me, lunacy in terms of what it costs, but they could afford it at the time. Now they're having issues like what they have with Ryan Pulock, which, he's just signed a 2-year deal where that pays him about $5 million a season, and it's going to walk him straight to free agency, and he's their best defenseman. So what Lou has done here is he has kicked the mega contract down the road a couple of years. And in an effort, I believe Matt Barzal still needs to be signed.
Yep.
I haven't seen anything. Lou's kicked Ryan's contract down the road. Matt Barzal is yet to be done. He's doing what he has to do right now rather than probably what you would want to do. I bet that was a tough negotiation. I bet the Barzal negotiations are pretty rough as well. But what I think with, yes, in a vacuum, this doesn't look good. But Lou Lamoriello is probably thinking a couple of things. First off, I may not be here in a couple of years, and I need this guy in the lineup. And number two, we'll worry about that problem. What's Lou's number one saying? If you have time, use it. He's just given himself time. There's nothing that says as soon as this next year is over, because as soon as this next year is over, he can start talking extension because Ryan Pulock will have 1 year left on his deal, and you can start talking extension. Okay, then I'll talk. Then I got 12 months from that point to figure out the next extension for this guy and pay him what closer to what his market value would be. I think Lou Lamoriello is a lot smarter than people give him credit for. I think there's a little bit of ageism there. I think that I could disagree with a lot of what Lou Lamoriello has done. I'm not necessarily a fan of it all, but what you can't do is argue with the results. The Islanders have been, since he got there, a team that's made the second round twice. Right? There's nothing you can.
They were in the Final Four. They made some moves that are questionable, no question. They had to give up Devin Tays for 2 second round. Like, not good. Not good. And probably not what they were expecting.
But the result is the result. You give up those assets and you're like, oh, that's not great. But then in the end, if you're in the Final Four of the entire NHL, you're like, okay, that was worth it.
And they have the best goaltending coach in the league by far. Like, along your lines, Jesse, like they've revived Robin Lehner and then Semyon Varlamov's careers in consecutive seasons.
And then hired Barry Trotz.
Yeah.
And just became like the league's best metapod. Like we've talked about, just Defense, Harden.
And that's
Harden,
a
Harden.
Lou team. Wasn't that what New Jersey was when they were at their best? It was Patrick Elias, you scored all the goals. Everybody else just keep Brodeur protected.
Yeah.
That was it.
Steve,
Yes.
can we bring up what you mentioned before the show?
What did I mention?
In that, does Lou think he doesn't have a lot of time left in the game of hockey and that now his moves are just to win now?
Well, it's just a theory. One, because you're never going to learn anything about Lou Lamoriello from him, right? He's never going to reveal anything. But I'm just like, I look at the Pollock thing, for example. You know, why would he do something as short-sighted as, you know, only sign him till his UFA year and then he can leave? And what I came up with is, well, surely he's going to be done soon. Right? But we said that how many years ago? We said that before he was Leafs GM. You know, not many people work into their 70s at all, let alone deep into their 70s. Lou Lamoriello is probably going to be the first ever 85-year-old GM. And, you know, you mentioned ageism. Maybe it was a little on my part saying, well,
Mine too.
He doesn't think he has long left. So he's like, screw it. I'll kick this can down the road and it's someone else's problem. And here's a 2-year deal for you. We thought that about some of the things he did with the Leafs. You know, meanwhile, you know, here he is still working several years later. He gave Zaitsev a 7-year contract, and that wasn't short-sighted as much as it was just a bad move. But he was obviously like, yeah, this guy will be great for 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's got a fascinating brain. I think what we lose with Lou Lamoriello sometimes in evaluating his teams is you need to look at every player on his roster and assume you're getting the best version of that player possible.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be. Because like I'm just looking at the Islanders now, and it's disrespectful, obviously, given what they've done over the past couple of years. But I just look at the team that they have, and I'm like, there's no way they're pulling this off without the absolute best that all of these young men have to give them.
Yep.
But that's a credit to management, right? If
Yes, it is.
If you throw together a collection of guys and then those guys all mesh and they perform and they give you their best, then that's kudos to management. Thumbs up for throwing in a great collection of guys that'll perform.
It's a state of mind, right? Like the shaving thing we thought was ridiculous, but it's a state of mind. Every day you wake up and you're in the bathroom after, you know, just waking up, and in a way you're at work. You got to shave. So, okay, that's how the day starts. And now I got to go to the arena. So I'm going to show up in, you got to show up in your suit. And we're on the road. And from the moment you wake up in your hotel that morning, you can do whatever you want for breakfast. Or actually, no, you probably can't. You probably got to have a team breakfast. So every part of your day is controlled by your work. You have to shave. Then you got to get dressed in a certain way. Then you got to go have, breakfast with your teammate. Every moment is work. It's professional. We can talk about, how that translates to other fields and, driving people nuts and everything. But geez, look at his track record in the NHL. It seems to work.
Yeah. Now I don't love that move for them because you want to grab some free agent year deals, free agent years. However,
to be clear, I hate this for them,
but the fact is they didn't, and he still got now 24 months to figure out the extension.
And
it's not the worst thing in the world. It really isn't.
And you could argue they have a window because they made it to the second round and then they made it to the third. And of all the teams Tampa played, who gave them the most trouble?
The Islanders.
Columbus, arguably.
Columbus gave them trouble. I felt like the Islanders were just they gave Tampa a better version of what the Blue Jackets gave
them.
Better
Columbus, yes.
Yeah, there was an argument to Dallas. Dallas was pretty feisty. Boston just didn't hold up.
Good.
Yeah, good. But even though the Islanders got caved in terms of shots, they reminded me so much of the 2013 Leafs where, yeah, they're getting outshot to hell, but at any moment, there's a breakaway going the other way and you're boned.
And it's funny, with Lou Lamoriello teams, there may not be a dearth of talent, but they seem to outperform expectation. I mean, if you look at the 16-17 Leafs, and then the next year, the 17-18 Leafs. There's
a little element of youth with the Islanders that I guess because they've only been Islanders in their career, we kind of forget about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like Anthony Beauvillier is a super underrated player. Barzal is even probably an underrated player. And another thing about Lou Lamoriello teams is he likes to have the same guys on there forever.
Yeah.
You know, I'm curious. There is part of me that would love to know what those RFA contracts would look like. The Leafs RFA contracts would look like under Lou, because with the Devils, I mean, you can think about any team from any point in our childhood and probably rattle off the same core 6 or 7 guys, right? There was obviously Brodeur, Niedermeyer, Stevens, Danico forever and ever and ever.
Mm-hmm.
Up front, there was Patrick Elias. I remember there was a lot of Jason Arnott.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then with the Islanders, he's just John Tavares obviously left immediately, but beyond that, I mean, he knows who he likes. Anders Lee is locked up forever. Brock Nelson is locked up forever. Jordan Eberle is locked up
Anders
forever.
Lee didn't almost get locked up forever, though. Remember, that was they made him sort of the second choice last year.
Joe is locked up forever. I think that was an extension by him as well.
And he was a great add to that playoff run. There's no question.
Yeah.
I think,
so in terms of, you know, my stupid little thing where I'm like, oh, he's not thinking about the future. Typically his moves are, you know, so maybe we should take into account the pandemic and how it may have stifled even Mighty Lou.
I think if you were to put Lou Lamoriello in charge when those contracts with Marner, Matthews, Nylander were signed, first off, I don't think Tavares happens. Flat out, I just don't think it happens.
I agree.
So, I think that there's less pressure at that point, to be honest, because there's no John Tavares in Toronto. I don't think. Beyond that, and anybody who says that that's a good thing forgets that he scored 47 goals in his first year here. I love how people are hard on John Tavares all of a sudden, as though he hasn't come in and just blast the doors off the place. Like, it's unbelievable.
He showed up these bubble playoffs.
Yes, he was great.
Of all the guys on the forward group to show up, John Tavares is at the top of the list.
Matthews too. I think Matthews did a pretty good playoff.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But I think
of all the Leafs who take crap, which is basically all of them, John Tavares' criticism feels the most arbitrary.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's just, well, he's the captain.
You know, that's
okay.
not a valid
it's not a thing. It's not they lost and he's the captain. So what is he? Is the C the blame me letter? And if they win, it's all because it hit. Like, that's dumb. That is, it's lazy. It's lazy. Watch the games, man.
So when it comes to those contracts, I think there would be a lot less pressure. And I think because there would be less pressure, I have a feeling that Lou Lamoriello probably would have been able to squeeze those guys a little bit. And yes, they would have. I think there would have been time missed. I think Matthews would have ended up with the contract Matthews ended up with, maybe a little bit less because nobody saw him making $11.5 million. But I feel like there's a chance that he's still in the the 5-digit number, whatever it is, 7 digits. I don't even know what the hell it is. 8 digits. What's a million?
7.
Okay.
No, 8.
8 digits, whatever. I do think that Nylander misses time, and I do think Marner misses time.
Yeah.
This time.
You know,
and I don't think Lou cares. He'd be like,
yeah, but people will correctly be like, "Oh, master negotiator. He gave Zaitsev $4 million for 7 years."
Agreed.
Right.
It's because he believed in the. I don't think it was because he was going to be ground down by the player's agent. I think they believed Nikita Zaitsev was good.
We looked at it.
We did.
You know, we're thinking with recency bias, but here, let me just bring it up.
Not even good, just a role on the team that would be stable for 7 years.
And at $4 million, affordable.
Exactly. I think that's how Lou thinks of things. Like, we started this conversation. He had a place for Zaitsev, and he thought he was going to just fill that hole and just leave it alone for the next half a decade.
And when you play him on the power play, Zaitsev does well.
Yes. So Nikita Zaitsev came into the NHL as a 24-year-old rookie with a right-handed hockey stick. Oh, my God. And put up 36 points.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you think that's about to be your forever, oh my God, yeah, lock that up.
It's worth $4 million.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that's one of the.
But then they stopped playing two defensemen on the power play.
Right.
As they should have.
Yeah, and to be honest, that was Martin Marincin was playing like 78 games that year. Connor Carrick was in their top 4 on defense. Like, it was not a strong defensive core. Zaitsev did not have a high bar to jump over and got a ton of ice time where probably on another team he wouldn't have gotten it.
His fancies weren't any good, but like, leave his fancy numbers alone. Like, 36 points. What's this minus 22 all about? You know what I mean? There were red flags.
Minus
and
22.
Lou just went 7. Was that the worst on the team? It had to be. Yes, it was.
So in the end, they got rid of it.
They got rid of it. And
Who's they?
That gift brought us Cody Ceci. Kyle got rid of it. Moving on, Anthony Mantha. That's a good deal, by the way. Detroit signing him for 4 years, $22 million. Not bad.
I love that player.
Pretty solid player.
Yeah.
Steve Yzerman, man. Don't you just hate that Detroit's going to be good again? I sort of have enjoyed that Detroit has been a non-player for such a long time because my entire freaking life, and since I was like, I don't know, 2 years old, 1990, they were back on. That was when they were on the rise. Detroit's been good.
They're going to catch people off guard, man.
I hate them.
They're going to catch people off guard. They're
going to be good.
They were bad last year too intentionally.
Yeah.
Too intentionally. They're going to come back young and they're going to come back healthy. And they even made some additions that are like not mind-blowing, but good.
Mm-hmm. And
maybe not Mark Stahl, but
they can weaponize their cap space, man. Oh,
they have it says 9.5 on cap friendly.
That's going to be a fortune come trade deadline.
I just have one question.
You're only allowed half a question.
Who plays goalie for the Detroit Red Wings?
Jonathan Bernier. Bernier,
who was pretty good last year. He had 907 is not a good number. On Detroit, it is Vezina worthy.
Sterling.
And Thomas Greiss. I'm very interested to see how Thomas Greiss does outside of the New York Islanders.
I think that's an interesting pairing for a non-playoff team, like a team that's probably not expecting to go to the playoffs. I mean, I know they probably want to. They're going to show up at camp and go, yes, we want to make the playoffs. But for a non-playoff team, Bernier coming off a pretty good year, a rebound year, and I would argue maybe a career-saving year. Thomas Greiss. I mean, that's kind of interesting. You got a motivated pair in net who are going to be competing with each other for ice time. And then you've got young players. And then you've got guys who have been there, the Dylan Larkins of the world, the Anthony Manthas, who understand how hard it is in the NHL and who are still relatively young.
All their young players, players are going to be better. Their goaltending. You're
Philip Zadina. You got to maybe get a full season out of Philip Zadina.
You guys have a lot more confidence in Jonathan Bernier than I do.
Well, listen, he's not great.
That. No, he's
not great, but he'll be there. I don't know if you can make Thomas Greiss your starter, but I think it'll end up working out by the end of the season that Bernier is their 1A sort of guy. And it's going to be an interesting season because there's no way, by the way, this is just my opinion, there's no way it's going to be an 82-game season. There's absolutely
no. It'd probably be 70, I would think.
No,
72.
I would be thrilled with that many games. It's not going to happen.
They need to hit a certain number for television contracts with Rogers, so they'll have to hit something. It'll have to be like 70 something, I assume.
Man, I was watching a clip of our podcast. By the way, we were talking. The episode title was Kasky's Woes. And it was the show that we did the day after Casimir Kasky's-Woe got lit up in his first and only NHL game because the Leafs abandoned him. That was 11 months ago.
Wow.
That was less than a year ago.
Wow.
And it's still not the next season.
I know.
And then we're going to do a 70-game season that starts in February.
January.
I don't know.
They're going to hit the January date. And it's going to be
31st.
A complete season.
Yep.
That's my prediction. That's what I'm holding to.
I'm going to
That'd
say
be very
70
nice.
games. I'm going to say 70 games just to be different because I'm a contrarian.
It'll be like 72 to 82. somewhere in that.
69.
Perfect. That's a nice amount. Perfect. Lastly, before we get into the press conference, I do want to mention the whole Twitter argument about hitting in the OHL. So basically, if you don't know about this, the Ontario government, in all of its wisdom, has put a minister in charge who I would personally say is a questionable choice, and is an extremely intelligent person. There's no question about that. But I do question, to me, a spotty record. And basically, the question is, can the kids in the OHL, can they hit because of COVID? Are they allowed to hit? And Lisa MacLeod, she's the MPP. She has said, absolutely, we are not negotiating this because it was reported by Darren Dreger that the two sides are talking. And she said, this is not a negotiation point. She retweeted him and said that. Bob McKenzie came back at her and said, well, okay, well, and in typical Bob fashion, just like Elliot Friedman, very neutral. There are a lot of questions here. What's the difference between a hit and a 20-second puck battle, which happens all the time, which potentially would be more dangerous in this idea. So I don't know what the right answer is, but I know that doing nothing is not the right answer. Personally, I think you have to play the cards that you're dealt. So when we are dealt a pandemic, instead of sitting back and saying, we're not going to do this, we need to look at what are the solutions to do this. We have to continue to live. We have to continue to, these guys, say what you want. Oh, just don't have them play. These kids have been working their whole lives. This could affect, there's millions of dollars at stake for some of these kids. And frankly, for some of the coaches and for some of the teams, their survival depends
Scholarships.
Imagine just saying.
Oh wait, no, not major junior. Sorry, but junior A anyway.
But imagine you're looking at this as a league owner. Your franchise just might not exist. You may never open the door again. And for a lot of these communities, which the OHL is represented in, they're a major deal. So, to say, well, why don't they just not play? I think fundamentally disrespects the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of jobs at stake here that are beyond just the players. The player safety has to be paramount. I believe that it already is. The question is the body checking argument really the argument here? Or are we needing to take a step back and go, what are we doing to protect the players outside of the rink so that when they do hit on the ice, the chances of COVID being spread or even being brought onto the ice are basically as close to nil as we can get them. And I think that's the issue that we're facing is that, there's so many people that are willing to wait and go, well, it's just junior hockey. Who the hell cares? Well, I'm sorry, but if you did anything for 12 years from the time you were 4 years old and you had a dream and you actually had the talent to make it happen and your parents are driving you to practice or whatever, even if you don't end up in the NHL, even if you don't play hockey professionally in the Swedish league or in the AHL or in the KHL or whatever, it could lead to other things for you. And there's plenty of good things that come out of playing in the OHL for these kids. I want you to imagine you take the one focus of these kids' lives, the thing that they love the most in the whole world, away from them for a year and let them sit on their ass as teenagers and imagine what happens then. To me, sports give people focus. They give people a reason to get up in the morning. It gave me, when I was a kid, a reason to look forward to the weekend. I loved playing hockey. And that was the thing I looked forward to most about Saturdays. If I didn't have hockey in my teen years, I'd have been lost. I'd have been drinking a lot, frankly. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to all of these kids, but I think it's extremely, I was drinking anyway, but it's extremely destructive to take away something like that from a young person. So the question on the adult side is, how do we continue to do this with the cards that we are dealt, which is a global pandemic? And that is the challenge. You want to be an MP or an MPP or whatever the hell they are. You want to be a league executive. You want to be a coach. You want to be in hockey at all. You want to be in government at all. I'm sorry this isn't a normal year, and I'm sorry these aren't normal circumstances, but that is what you are paid for. You are paid to figure this out. And when an MPP comes out and says, we're not negotiating this, you've completely shut down the conversation. And we know full well that they are negotiating it. We know that they are talking. We know that they are throwing proposals back and forth. So to say that is not only wrong and just destructive, it's disingenuous. Of course you're talking. Well, that's how you come to a solution. It's not Lisa MacLeod says in the OHL and all of hockey follows. She knows that as well as they do. So figure it out, protect the kids, and give them their reason to continue. This is a game that is already suffering in this country, and we call it part of our national fabric. We have to protect this game. We have to make it better. I understand the hockey culture things. We talked about that with Harnarayan earlier in the show.
That's part of protecting it.
This is part of protecting it.
And the Memorial Cup specifically means a lot to a lot of people.
Yes.
And I think the highest rating for the Memorial Cup was 2005 when Sidney Crosby was in it. And they nearly had a million people for just that game. You know, it was like 800,000 or something like that. So a lot of people are invested in the communities, the people who just care about hockey. It's not just something to throw away and make blanket statements about.
Right. And in politics, it so often is polarizing. Steve, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You saw the Oshawa Generals win in 2015.
Yes, I did.
Do you think that the people of Oshawa cared? Do you think it mattered to them?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that the people of Erie, do you think Connor McDavid cared about losing?
He did. I saw him when he came off the ice.
Right.
So it was his last game in junior.
Would you say that it's an important part of the culture in Oshawa, the Generals?
An enormous part.
So how does it serve that community and any of these communities to discontinue that or to stifle any sort of discussion about player safety?
It doesn't. And I think it is a ridiculous distraction of a conversation, the no body checking, and it's too easy and I think disingenuous to be like, well, I'm consulting health officials, which Of course you should. Of course.
That's the bare minimum. Like
there should be.
What are you gonna not?
There should be folks within hockey though who are consulted about this decision too, because they would tell you that's not going to bloody do anything. Taking out body checking, but body checking is you collide, and generally it's over. Brian Campbell leveling RJ Umberger. They met for a very short amount of time before RJ Umberger laid down and Brian Campbell went on his merry way. These working in the corner and rubbing up next to each other and net front battles and like, what are we even doing? This is a waste of time. It's a silly conversation. Lisa MacLeod tweeted that out with 97 days before the proposed beginning to the OHL season. Do you know what Ontario's COVID numbers were 97 days ago? I think it was somewhere around 100. We've just passed 1,000. So it's gone per day. It's gone really poorly in one direction. Maybe it'll go the complete reverse by 97 days by now. But the point of the fact of the matter is it is a complete distraction. And Doug Ford knows that. That's why he had to tweet, and Jeff Merrick put it great, where he goes, this is basically the equivalent of a lawyer going, Your Honor, what my client was trying to say. Lisa MacLeod, for context for non-Ontarians, is a giant pain in Doug Ford's ass and has been for several years. She was previously the Minister of Children's Services. I can't remember the exact title or something like that. She wanted to change the way, families of kids with autism get funding. They hated it. They didn't like her track record with communication. They didn't feel listened to. So she was shuffled.
Wow, that's surprising.
Right. Oh, I know. It connects to this. So she was shuffled out, and then early reports were whoever the new minister is, I forget the person's name. They were like, hey, this person's actually at least listening to our concerns. Lisa MacLeod, by the way, was previously mentioned on this podcast, not last episode when I was saying snide remarks about her. She was previously mentioned in a story that we covered where she allegedly stumbled up to Eugene Melnyk at a concert and called him a fucking loser. Yes, it was that same person. So anyway, now she was shuffled to the Minister of Sports because she didn't do a very good job at her previous post. And now there's another controversy here that didn't need to be a controversy, and Doug Ford is once again having to come out and save her ass.
And you're saying to yourself, why is she a minister of anything? Lisa MacLeod is an extremely popular MPP within her riding and important to the conservative base in Ontario. So, as much as, in politics, you got to work with people you don't like, even within your own party. And I would assume maybe they like each other, but I would assume that the way Doug Ford has played this in Ontario, and for anybody outside of Ontario, he's the equivalent of like what Andrew Cuomo is in New York. In a first minister's position, he has worked with all levels of government. He hasn't got, he's disagreed with people, but he's working with John Tory in Toronto. He's working with all the mayors in Peel, in Mississauga. He's worked with Justin Trudeau, who, they were sort of very diametrically opposed and worked in partnership in tandem with. He's very much played, let's all work together through this.
He's gone very out of his way to praise Justin Trudeau, which has been shocking, jarring to see.
Yeah. Right? Would never have happened before this.
No.
Even if he privately would have praised him. He's been very much the guy that, whether you agree with his politics or not, has tried to work with all levels of government, and I'll give him that. The issue with people like Lisa MacLeod and anybody in any sort of negotiation is when you say no, when you just flat out say no before the negotiations has even started, if you disagree with the fact that a negotiation needs to take place, then not very much can be done. And the reality is, even our conversations about topics on this show are a negotiation. We are trading facts, and we are trying to come to some sort of conclusion or opinion. And that's what everything is. When you go home and you try to figure out what's for dinner, you are trading information back and forth with your roommate or your wife or your husband or whoever you're with, or your kids. And they're often negotiating for macaroni and cheese, and you're saying, no, not tonight. We've had that the last 5 nights. You can't win this one.
This is really specific.
But you know what I'm saying? When you shut this down, it's really destructive. And I don't understand why somebody in her position needs to be like that.
Well, I was tweeting about this. Like, it's just another example of women's hockey players being ignored. I joked about this with Ailish Forfar, who I co-host NHL Chat Room with. And I was just like, well, it's so good that when you were playing women's hockey in university and in the CWHL, that you were never in close contact with an opponent.
Right. They don't allow body checking in women's hockey.
Yeah. And what's great is they never get anywhere near each other,
Yeah. Never seen a puck battle on that, right?
No, never, right. Not once. It is preposterous. And it is complete posturing to be like, well, this isn't a negotiation and it's final. And this is for the health of it doesn't help anybody. It's ridiculous. It's a distraction at a time where we don't need it. Mm-hmm. If we're going to protect these children, look at it that way, children, there are 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in the OHL, but the very few 15, children. The 16, the 17-year-olds, those are children. If we're going to be serious about protecting them, let's stop with the show. Let's stop with the sideshow that is taking body checking out of it, as if it's going to protect them from COVID. It's ridiculous. We can already look at what the QMJHL has done. And I think that's such a much better jumping off point. Has this worked? Because they've played. They've been playing, but there have been entire teams that have been infected with COVID. So is it working? Should the OHL risk going through something like that? I'd be on the side of no. An entire team of teenagers getting COVID is probably bad. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm not totally sure where the conversation should begin, but like Adam was saying, there should be a conversation. And even though I can't offer a place where the conversation should begin, I can tell you it shouldn't be frigging body checking. Ridiculous. We good?
Let's do the press conference.
Well said, Stephen. Well said.
Yeah, fuck off.
Just me.
Yeah, nobody else said anything.
No.
This is the Steve Dangle Podcast featuring Steve Dangle and Steve Dangle alone. The views expressed on this podcast are Steve Dangle's.
Yeah, retweets are all Steve, and he agrees with all the opinions.
Yeah, including all that about like the French helping out the States. And
yeah, oh yeah.
I
the
said
book
that.
You wrote about your growing up in Alberta.
Brooks. Oh, never forget it.
Never forget it.
Never forget. Oh man, I remember. Those were the times.
I'm gonna read a article for you guys from People Magazine.
Okay.
It begins. Despite their efforts, Julianne Hough and Brooks Laich couldn't seem to make their marriage work.
God.
Hough officially filed for a divorce from Laich on Monday, according to documents obtained by The Blast, 5 months after announcing their separation. Though they had continued working on their relationship post-split, a source tells People they were ultimately on different pages when it comes to their future.
Who's the source, I wonder?
They were trying to get their marriage to work for a long time, says the source. They both made many changes and compromised, but it just wasn't enough.
It's nice that their agent wrote that for them.
They don't have the same vision for the future.
Okay, so last week, E! News put out a freaking thing about how they were reconciling. This is such a joke. Do Julianne Hough and Brooks Laich's people actually think that we're going to be fooled into thinking that anyone cares about this? Like, I know it was like, I remember I was telling you like 6 months ago that we were like, I was like, this is a little weird. These guys.
Can you explain the backstory just a little? Just for anybody who doesn't know the context.
He's fired up about this for a reason.
Yeah. So these guys, and I get tagged in Julianne Hough and Brooks Laich posts all the time by SDP listeners, by the way.
Brooks
never
Laich,
forget
former
a
Leaf.
thing. Brooks Laich, former Leaf, former Capital, former King. Brooks Laich and Julianne Hough are married. Good for you. The thing is, and Brooks has got a podcast with Gavin DeGraw, and it's what's it called, Jesse? How Men Think.
Yeah, something like that.
Can you bring it up? Because I want you to read the bio. Please read the bio of this podcast. You're going to cringe. Now, Julianne is extremely talented. She's an unbelievable dancer. I believe she can sing quite well as well. Multi-talented, Dancing with the Stars, does tours with her brother Derek. My stepmom went to one of them at Casino Rama. She said it was amazing.
I have the podcast here, by the way.
What's that? So so they're extremely talented. Brooks, extremely talented athlete. They marry. Wow, what a gorgeous couple. And then we find out during the pandemic that there's a bunch of stories coming out about them before the pandemic starts. And then during the pandemic, they're talking about how they're quarantining separately for months at a time. And all of these stories keep getting fed to these entertainment outlets. Now, here's the thing. If you're a celebrity, one of the hardest things to hang on to is being a celebrity. And if you are a B, C, D list celebrity, you're over here. You're over. If you're watching on camera, you're like, can I just get my nose on screen? Because everybody wants the spotlight. And these guys have never had a reality show, although I know that they wanted one, have never really, what have they done together other than they got married?
Dancing with the Stars?
No, they didn't, but they didn't get married because of Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, but they were on. She was on it, right?
She was on it, sure. Yeah. But the reality was they wanted to show these two. And they kept feeding the press information about their relationship. And every week, every couple of days for a while there, you got a new story about them. And then last week it kicked off again with them. Well, maybe they're reconciling. And then, Julianne is filed for divorce. Who do you think these sources are that are so interested in Brooks Laich and Julianne Hough's relationship? Are you kidding me? Come on now. It's what it is. And I've heard from people in the industry who dealt with Brooks Laich when he was in Toronto. There's not favorable things to be said. This is a person that wants to be famous desperately. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's so transparent. You look desperate. Mm-hmm. It's just sad. And every time I see it, I'm like, do these guys think that people don't know? And you read the comment section and all the people know. Everybody's like, who the hell are these guys? Like, it's not even, you weren't even on The Bachelor. Like, you weren't, it's like, so-and-so announced they're pregnant from season 18 of The Bachelor. I'm like, I don't know who that is, but Bachelor Nation knows who that is.
Yeah.
Right.
There are stands for The Bachelor.
There's somebody from Big Brother. I've never heard of them, but Big Brother fans know who they are. These guys have never been on a show together. They've never done anything together. He has a podcast. She has been on Dancing with the Stars, star, and then a hockey player. But they're not together. There is nothing there. There's no magic there. And now they're divorcing, and that's a story?
Can I tell you about how men think?
The entertainment side, it drives me absolutely nuts. Sorry, read the bio of Gavin DeGraw and Brooks Laich's podcast, Jesse.
Whose podcast?
Gavin DeGraw.
With Brooks Laich?
Yes.
Yeah, they have a podcast together.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesse?
They upload very frequently. Their most recent episode was November 2nd, so Monday, more recently than ours. So I'll read you the bio here. Have you ever wondered what your husband is really thinking? Why does your boyfriend do that? It's no secret that men don't often share their inner thoughts, even with each other. This podcast will literally serve as how men think, as NHL great Brooks Laich and award-winning musician, singer, songwriter Gavin DeGraw and their panel of experts, each of whom is in a different stage of their life, open up on their personal and often hysterical views on relationships, marriage, children, health, wellness, lifestyle, self-discovery, and the world. We are opening the mind of the man for you and revealing how men think, an iHeartRadio podcast.
You want hysterical? That was my rant beforehand. I'm hysterical. That's the emotional state I'm in.
You're
After
what?
watching, like, just not in like, people think hysterical just means funny. Hysterics just means you're in a heightened state of emotion. This is.
I remember the last time we explained what hysterical means on the show. I threw my shoe at you. Do you remember that?
There you go. It's crazy that this keeps happening. Stop, guys. Go into the night, get your divorce, and go and figure out your careers. Like, Jesus. Like, can you do anything privately? Man, I just went through a divorce. You didn't know it was happening. It's done now. Like, it's that can happen. Nobody needs to know. I didn't need a source to talk about my relationship, which turned out to be my agent feeding. Now, I'm far less famous than these guys are. But
don't sell yourself short.
well, I mean, maybe not. Maybe freaking not.
No,
Like, it's
NHL great Brooks Laich, according to his podcast. bio.
They never sold out Review Cinema, did they? For free.
That's
They
true.
never sold out a free show at a small
let's see
theater, did they?
the What Men Want podcast do review, or what was the other one we did? The
Toronto?
The downtown Toronto and the Roundhouse. What was it? The video game area.
Oh, Rec Room.
Rec Room.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
you didn't
yes.
bring 500 people to the Rec Room. Gavin DeGraw and Brooks Laich.
For
And
free.
I'm sure they're nice people,
For free.
but it's just embarrassing. It's sad to watch. No one cares, man. Go get your divorce. It's an extremely tough thing to get a divorce. This isn't some whimsical, lovely, enjoyable experience. It's awful. It's awful, and it's sad for both sides.
Or it's a PR stunt.
Or maybe it's a PR stunt. And if it is, shame on you for using a divorce as a PR stunt, you asshole. If you're using it as a PR stunt. Only if you're using it as a PR stunt. Like, come on.
Oh, Jesus, Adam. I love Fired Up Adam.
I hate it.
And as long as we're being mean for no reason,
we're not
any
being
show-
mean. We're calling it like it is.
you're being a bully. Any show about, like, hey, here's how men think, I'm just like, I will never listen to that ever
No.
in my entire
Oh.
life.
Hasn't that been every show for the last 80 years? It's
The
sort of like
amount of there's a lot of
there's just not enough on how men
What
think.
society doesn't need is more men sharing their opinions.
no.
Yeah, they already got us.
And
we got
there's a
enough
lot
of
of
it.
mom stuff too. There's a lot of here's how to be a dude and here's how to be a woman, and it's just people sawing open their audience's head and taking a shit on top of their brain. Like, it is the most poisonous, ridiculous bullshit in the entire world.
Mhm.
I have not listened to one episode of this. They might be right on everything, but generally speaking, oh my God, it's the worst thing in the entire world for you. Now, talking about stories and shooting the shit, I can get behind that, but don't then be like, these stories are now how to be a man.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and don't market it to women as though this is how all men think. Because
You are not Mel Gibson from the
They're
movie with Mel Gibson.
They're targeting women with a show like that. Do you think men need to know how men think? Men know how men think. That podcast isn't geared towards men. It's not.
Gavin DeGraw and Brooks Laich.
Yeah.
Okay. Neat. This is way more time than I thought we would dedicate to this.
Well,
I love Fired
just
Up
saying.
Adam.
Well, it's just like, listen, every celebrity does this to an extent, but they're celebrities. Like, you do know what I
What
mean?
does that mean, Adam?
It means that these guys are not celebrities on that level. And stop pretending. We all need to stop pretending. Stop trying to make Brooks Laich and Julianne Hough happen. They're not fetch. It's not going to happen. That's what I'm saying. Okay? They're great. They're talented on their own. Have your divorce, work on your career, stop drumming up fake shit that you think people want to read, and stop having your agent write shit as a source about your relationship. What a load of shit that is. As though TMZ is going to send a reporter to try to get the inside track on Julianne Hough and Brooks Laich. Give me a break. Give me a break. And again, I'm sure they're nice people. I just don't think, like, TMZ doesn't care. E-News doesn't care. They don't care. It's like, oh, you fed me this story. Sure, we'll throw it up on the site, see how it does. They're not going to send a reporter. They're not going to have sources. The Kardashians, they're going to try to have some sources. Not these guys. Sorry. Very different levels.
You're going so nuts that I could see you go nuts in the reflection in the picture behind me.
No.
It's very distracted.
Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Was I too mean? I don't want to be mean. It's just sort of like, come on, guys.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree with you. And if they
Brooks Laich and Julianne Hough might, and maybe I'll show up in their next story. They'll say local podcast host goes after them, and it's unfair and mean. And I can't wait to show up on E-News with them.
Should we bring Brooks Laich on this podcast?
Yeah, sure. What the fuck? Why not?
No.
I want to know how men think, Steve. I'll have him on.
I actually just had a feeling like when I bite into a pepper. Like I just.
Oh no.
I'd like to ask him why he's doing this. I would love to ask him. Bro, why are you doing this, man?
So what are you doing?
Yeah, in a friendly enough manner, but it's like, dude, we know what you're doing. It's pretty transparent. Why are we doing this? What's the end game here? Is that if you guys are breaking up, why do you keep releasing shit about your relationship? Because are you going to end up together or not? And if you are, what are you guys doing together? If you're in an entity that you want the public to be interested in, are you going to do a show?
You are so, Adam, you're so much more fired up about this story than you need to be.
I just see it in my shit. Well, you know what it is too? It's podcast listeners tagging me in their shit all the time. I can't get away.
Buddy, I get tagged in. I get tagged in Game 7 content daily.
Oh my God. Well,
can I end the show with one thing about our listeners?
Who we love.
The listeners of the podcast right now, if you've stayed in this long, I need your help, and children need your help.
Okay.
On the top of my Twitter at Jesse Blake, there's a pinned tweet where you can donate to Easter Seals Ontario. We got about 10 days left until when the tournament would have happened, the Eric Lindros Celebrity Classic that we play in every year. And this year, I'm trying to raise $2,020 because 2020 has been 2020. So if you can help me reach that goal, I've just kind of started campaigning over the weekend. So I'm going to try and do it in 2 weeks, try and raise 2020. So if you go there and help, if you can, send some money towards Easter Seals, that would be great. Steve also has a campaign going. Adam, I believe you also got a campaign going.
I do.
Correct?
I'm going to pin mine at the top of my page tonight as well. I need some donations because I am desperately behind.
So yes,
but that's what I did last year too.
There you go. If we could all get some money towards Easter Seals, that would be a big help. They need it now more than ever.
Help push us over the top. Rachel's Raiders are sitting at $29,258.20. Get us over 30, and then help Jesse hit his goal of $2,020. Also worth noting, and I pinned this to my Twitter, I'm auctioning off a bunch of my jerseys. Some of them say Dangle on the back. There's a Stamkos one in there. There's a limited edition Kyle Lowry jersey from EASHL that they released last year. There's less than 50 of these jerseys in the world. And it's currently going for, what's the bid at? It's at $380, which for a jersey that you cannot get anywhere else is a steal. There's also a Frosted Flakes jersey that is signed by Wendell Clark that you can get, and that one's going for like $60 right now. If you know someone who's a huge Wendell Clark fan, Christmas is right around the corner.
I'm also auctioning something off. If you donate $3,000, I will send you a picture of Steve Dangle nude with a pepper in front of his junk.
Wow.
Ooh.
There you go.
That's the cost, $3,000.
Is that, are you making that on your own computer? Or
no, he sent me the photo. He sent me the photo. So that's Steve, cute. I have the photo. I'm going to send it out for $3,000.
What kind of pepper are we talking here, Jesse?
It was a bell pepper.
Oh, was a bell pepper.
Yeah.
All right.
Big one.
If you'd said Shishito, I would have been like,
you see, because Adam, how dare
tiny.
you? You get it? You get it because you get it. And I'm going to be posting more jerseys soon. I don't have any more Dangle jerseys to sell, but I do have some cool ones. Listen, every dollar counts. Easter Seal, everyone's been hit hard by COVID. Easter Seals has been hit hard. They're no different. But the need doesn't go away. So let's raise some gosh darn money. That's
right.
Sorry to use harsh language.
So we are just a programming note as well. We're taking next week off. We will be back on the 18th of November. We do have some more surprises that we are working on for guests. We're very excited for what November and December look like. And it's weird because there's no hockey, but the show is going to be like we are in the off season normally, interesting in the other way. We love doing these interviews and we're going to be doing more of them. So look out for that. And obviously as hockey starts to pick back up again, so will we.
And help us out. We want to upload some classic clips. I have some in mind, but give us a hand. Time codes would certainly help. But even if you just give us an idea of what the bit is, and then you can all comment underneath and do some sort of detective. Oh, it was this episode. So yeah, help us out with that so we can make the content that you want. And
Fun
also,
fact, I believe our first video was 2016 already. It's that long ago.
Oh my God.
Jesse used to record like 10 minutes of the show.
That was the Sasky podcast, right?
No, I don't think so.
Or one of them.
It was in Rogers. It was at Rogers in the backup studio on the 5th floor.
Yeah, it wasn't until we were in the building.
OG studio.
Yeah, it wasn't at Adam's place.
I think when our partnership with 590 started, I believe. But that was 2016. Can you believe that?
It was a long time ago, man.
Matthew's first year. Just throwing that out there. That's how long we've been doing YouTube videos. So listen, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the 18th. We're available on Twitter. We will continue to throw out content every single day. Give us some of your greatest clip ideas. As Steve said, donate to Easter Seals because it's a good cause and you're a good person if you can. Obviously, things are tough for everybody right now. We get it. Steve is holding the Stanley Cup above his head right now. Almost like Mark Messier could have, as if it was a cookie.
There he is.
Vancouver Canucks great Mark Messier.
There he is. I'm holding the Stanley Cup above Mark Messier's head. There he is at the side of the screen.
That's it for us today. We will see you later.
The Steve Dangle Podcast. Follow the guys on Twitter at Steve_Dangle, at Adam WYLDE, and at Jesse Blake. Connection.